Best job in the world, this one. And I can say one more thing about Andy. He arranged, I don't know if anybody here is in Gwent Wildlife Trust, but there were mornings of lectures, weren't there? And you arranged at least 2 of them, I seem to recall. I didn't come this year. At the Memorial Hall?
Oh right, our local wildlife site landowner days.
That's
yes,
it. I came to one of them, but I couldn't make it this year. So that's Andy. He's probably done a lot more in Gwent.
I'd like to think in 13 years I've done more than that. But yes,
that's the bit I know about. Anyway, I'm now leaving it to Andy to talk about Gwent butterflies. Okay?
Joe, thank you very much. Right, I'm Andy, Gwent Wildlife Trust. Thank you for coming along. I believe we're competing against a separate dragonfly talk tonight at the Grange. So thank you for coming here. I'll be asking how many people are at the dragonfly one and see if I won. So there we go. But so we're going to go through all the butterflies we have here in Gwent. Any questions? Just yell them out. We've got quite a lot of butterflies here. There's 59 species of butterfly in the UK, and we have, I forget now, 30 odd of those species here in Gwent, but we're going to go through every single one of them, I'm afraid. So there we go. So what comes first, the butterfly or the egg? Tonight it's very much the egg, and I'm cheating here. These are actually moth eggs, but they look just like a butterfly egg. So there we go. It's all fine. So obviously, life cycle of your butterfly starts off with the eggs here. They hatch out, and then you get the caterpillar. Normally I get, when this caterpillar comes. People don't like this caterpillar. This is cabbage white, or there's actually 3 white species that sort of group together as the cabbage white. So there's the large white, the small white, and the green veined white. And this is the caterpillar of the large white, which is quite sort of keen on eating your cabbages, your brassicas kind of thing. I just let them chomp away in my garden, but other people maybe don't. But it's great if you can sort of delicately go out and move them onto another plant, or put some like sacrificial crop in, some nasturtiums or something, which they'll also eat, and hopefully leave your cabbages alone. If you leave them alone, then the next stage in the butterfly's life cycle is the chrysalis here. So that's actually, it's a thing of beauty, that really. So rather than killing the poor caterpillar and your cabbages, allow it to grow into this. You can see sort of like the wings already forming in there. You can sort of see the eye there. You got this bit of silk here holding on it. Really is sort of like, sort of, if that was jewellery, it would be an amazing thing. It's a fantastic thing. So when my daughter was a good bit younger, she's 17 now and has 0 interest in this at all, but when she was younger she used to love collecting caterpillars. So this is one of the caterpillars we collected. So we got some large white caterpillars, we put them in our little thing, we gave them food to eat kind of thing, and in a few weeks time they obviously they made their chrysalises, and then a couple of weeks later they hatched out. I think we had 5 of them, 4 of them hatched out in about 2 weeks, and 1 of them didn't hatch out. We kind of assumed that was dead, and that stayed in the tank. It was in all winter, and then one spring morning, the 5th one hatched out. It sort of amazed me, because they're all obviously from the same female butterfly, but 4 of them came out in 2 weeks, and 1 of them was in the chrysalis for probably 8 months kind of thing. But I guess this is kind of an adaptation. If all the butterflies came out in one go, and then it rained for 2 weeks, that's sort of the end of it. So if they're not putting all your eggs in one basket, some of them are sort of designed to actually go through the winter and spend the winter as a chrysalis, and that'll come out in spring and hopefully get some good with it. I didn't know they did this, but from sort of doing these little home experiments, you sort of discovered these things, and then obviously then you get the adult there. So that's a lovely large white butterfly that's come out obviously in springtime there on the bluebells. But I said we've got a few different sort of white butterflies. We also have the small white. There's not really a great deal of difference between them, but the extent of the black on the wing there is greater on the large white, and the large white, as you'd expect, is bigger than the small white, but the largest small white is bigger than the smallest large white. So you can't quite go on that, but if it's sort of the extent of black on the wing, and then they have quite different caterpillars. So if you can see the caterpillar of the large white, and then this is the caterpillar of the small white there. It's quite different looking caterpillars, but this will equally have a right go at your cabbages. And then we have a sort of third white species, which is the green veined white there, and then you sort of see it underneath. It's very different to the ones underneath. It's got this lovely coloration underneath, these green veins going along. And these will also eat your cabbages, but far less so. These are more likely to be sort of laying their eggs on more sort of wild, sort of garlic mustard, things like that. Oh, there's a question.
What's that on its, is it its thorax, its body? That yellow powder?
That's sort of, it's all just sort of the coloration, it's all the scales on its wings really. So,
okay.
So on the underneath of the large white and the small white, it's generally just white underneath, but this is sort of where it gets its green veins. And this is a very fresh one as well. A lot of butterflies, when they're first out there, sort of amazing. You can see every scale on them incredibly fresh, and then they get sort of a bit worn and battered over time. So I think this one is pretty freshly emerged.
Everybody's normally covered in a sort of hair or fur.
Yeah, so it's very sort of hairy on the sort of around the head, and then the.
But at the other end, it's orange.
Flower.
Oh, that's a flower. I was wondering when you got about the yellow. Yes, it is. That's a oxeye daisy there kind of thing. But yeah, it's sort of two yellows are kind of sort of blending there. It does almost look like it could be a load of eggs or something there. But yeah, that is just an oxeye daisy it's on there. And then another member of the white family is the orange tip. That's the orange tip caterpillar and the orange tip chrysalis there. It's another one we grabbed, but we have to be very careful having these in the cage because the caterpillars of the orange tip butterfly are actually cannibalistic. So, like the large white, that'll lay a whole cluster of 50 eggs on your cabbages, whereas the orange tip will only lay 1 or 2 eggs on each plant because the caterpillars will just eat each other. You don't really think of caterpillars as being these voracious predators. So these generally lay their eggs on like cuckoo flower, milkmaids, or on garlic mustard. There'll just be 1 or 2 eggs on there, and then I think they will happily eat the plant, but as soon as the plant sort of runs out of its leaves and stuff, they'll suddenly loop round and their brother or sister will be there and they'll start taking bites out of them. So we have to be very careful when we have them in our cage to make sure they're all spread out. But it sort of turned into this chrysalis here, which is a incredible sort of coloration on it. Just look, because the plant it's on, that'll go brown, and this always survives the winter as a chrysalis. So on the plant, after the plant goes brown, that goes brown. It's incredibly well camouflaged. But again, you can see the sort of the wings form there. So that would form its chrysalis in June, and it won't come out again until the following sort of March or April. So most of its life is spent just doing that. I don't know if it's in there and thinking and all this, looking forward to spring. I don't know. It almost seems a bit of a waste for most of your life to be sort of in there like that. But that's how they function, and out comes the adult. So it's the prettiest of all white butterflies, and it's there on a cuckoo flower, which is the main thing they lay their eggs on. So this is a male one. It's only the male ones have the orange tips. The female ones look very similar to the other sort of white butterflies. But if you see the underneath, it's glorious. The underneath of the orange tip. So this is another one we raised in captivity. So this caterpillar became that very chrysalis, became this very moth here. And the good thing is if you do sort of raise one, then you can kind of make it pose nicely for photographs as well. So this had just come out that morning kind of thing. We just sort of, obviously all its wings are all scrunched up, so it spent the morning sort of expanding its wings and just getting ready to have its first.
Do you do any work?
Do I do any work? This is all extracurricular. This is all in my own time with my daughter.
Yes, expenses for this.
No, none of this is in work time. So, and then this is the wood white, which is another white butterfly, which is sadly now extinct in Gwent. So it used to be quite a bit commoner, and I think the last ones were sort of just south of Monmouth, probably last seen there maybe 10 years ago, kind of thing. So these have gone extinct, sadly. But this butterfly relies very much on sort of more traditional forms of woodland management, sort of coppicing, opening up little glades in woodlands and the like. And it's very sort of specific about where it lives. Like the other white butterflies, the large white, that'll happily be in your garden. This will never be in your garden. And woodlands are increasingly less managed. There's not cutting for like charcoal, for coppice, for use of the poles or anything like that. So the woodlands get more of a closed canopy, and then the wood white has disappeared, sadly. So it'd be nice to try and get these back in the Wye Valley. But also, some of the butterflies will travel huge distances. The wood white is very weak flying, doesn't travel a huge distance. So once it's lost from an area, it's very unlikely there's going to be any wander back in, kind of thing. So that's all a bit sad.
That's a lovely caterpillar.
He's a spiky one. So this is a peacock caterpillar. So you can see it's incredibly sort of spiky, which is very apt because the only thing it eats is stinging nettles as well. So the combination of a stinging nettle and that spiky caterpillar is it's quite formidable, I would imagine, if something's trying to eat it. But obviously, lots of people want to get rid of stinging nettles, but they're particularly valuable, really, for quite a few of our butterfly species. So this is about the only thing that peacock caterpillars eat is stinging nettles. And this is again, this is me when I wasn't doing work or was doing work or something on my spare time. This is again, we got some peacock caterpillars, and this is their chrysalis, and there's even spikes on the chrysalis as well.
Could I ask, how big is that in real life? Is it, wow.
I'm being stupid. The caterpillar's probably about this big,
Right.
and then the chrysalis is probably only about that big, kind of thing. In the chrysalis, it all kind of virtually goes back to a soup, which is kind of amazing, really. But I think they keep some kind of vestigial kind of organs that the caterpillar had and the butterfly had. But it's all wrapped up in there, so then the butterfly kind of spreads out. Now they did some interesting experiments a few years ago, which was a bit harsh on the caterpillars, but they introduced certain smells to caterpillars, and then they did something which the caterpillars, they kind of prodded them or something that was a bit unpleasant for the caterpillar. And the caterpillars got conditioned. There was this smell, and then they got something nasty happen. And then they allowed the caterpillars to go into a chrysalis, go down into a soup, and come out as a butterfly. And then they introduced this smell to the butterfly, and the butterfly was having an adverse reaction to the smell, which shows there must be some memory. It was the thought they went to a total soup and came back out, but there must be some kind of memory somewhere in some kind of group of nerves or something that's remembered this smell through to just interesting experiment. And then obviously you get the beautiful butterfly then. So it's well worth having a few nettles in your garden or on your land, kind of thing, because that's how you then get the beautiful butterflies. Because these butterflies will go on countless different flowers, but it's generally the caterpillars are a lot more picky. So you need to sort of have a variety of plants so they can go through their full life cycle. And then we've got another sort of similar kind of butterfly, it's the painted lady, and you may have heard the amazing migrations painted ladies do. They'll sort of start off down in maybe northern Africa, southern Spain, very early in the spring, and they'll migrate quite a bit north. They'll have a generation, they'll lay their eggs, caterpillars, chrysalis, butterflies, and the next generation will fly up, and then in certain years you have like a painted lady year, and thousands of painted ladies arrive in the UK, kind of thing. And it did used to be think they did about 4 or 5 generations, got to the UK, and that was kind of like a dead end for them. It was kind of like they can't survive the winter here. But now it's been discovered that they do actually loop back and migrate back down to southern Europe, sort of at high altitudes, kind of thing. So there's some sense to this kind of mad thing of why move all the way up here. But the only things there, caterpillars will eat thistles, and no one really likes thistles particularly. But again, if you want the painted ladies to do well, then there's a story. I'm sure you've all heard of NEP as well, the big rewilding project down in Sussex, and everyone was criticising them, saying all their agriculture they let sort of go wild, and the fields were full of thistles, and they couldn't get rid of the thistles. And then, if you've read the book about NEP, they had this painted lady year when thousands upon thousands arrived in the UK, and painted ladies descended on all these fields full of thistles and always stripped them bare, kind of thing, and that kind of solved NEP's thistle problem. So it all worked out nicely. And then we've got another one that really likes nettles. That's a small tortoiseshell caterpillar. So there's the adult there. But last year they had an absolute, this is one of our, well, it used to be one of our commonest butterflies, the small tortoiseshell, so familiar with everybody, turned up in people's gardens. But last year they had an absolutely horrendous year. I think the numbers were down by like 90% or something. It was, and this year I've only seen 2, and I've been paid to do quite a few sort of invertebrate surveys across Gwent, kind of thing, and I managed to see 2 all summer, which is not good at all, kind of thing. So hopefully, at least there's a few about, hopefully with the right weather they can sort of get their numbers back up, because all they effectively need is some flowers for the adults and some nettles for the caterpillars. But whatever weather we've been having the last few years hasn't been great for them. We had a very hot summer 2023, which you think was great for butterflies. They need the sun and the warmth to warm up and fly, and for all the flowers to open. It was such a hot, dry summer that by the summer a lot of the flowers had actually wilted and gone over very early on in the year. So it was lovely weather for butterflies, but there weren't many flowers. And then the year after that, 2024, it rained all summer, which wasn't great for butterflies. So they seem to keep getting these bad summers. So this summer maybe hasn't been quite so bad. I think there's been a little bit of an upturn, but we won't know how well they've done this year until all the records are in, probably in January time. But it'll probably take a few years for them to bounce back. And if you don't get the good weather, then there's obviously lots of other problems using chemicals and loss of habitat and all sorts of things. But certainly when I was growing up, these were one of the commonest butterflies, and now it's quite difficult to find one.
Have other species sort of filled the gap as they, or have they all been affected by the same environmental factors?
The last couple of years has been pretty bad for them all, but there has been a few winners. There's a butterfly, the speckled wood, seems to have done a lot better. That was sort of historically, it was relatively localised down in southern England, and that has spread right across the UK now. And that's one of the butterflies that it's quite well adapted to flying in, even when it's not sunny, sort of, a bit sort of overcast. And when we haven't maybe had as nice weather, they've managed to do well. So there's probably for all our wildlife, there's all these winners and losers with climate change, and some things are doing better. But overall, across the board, it's very much downwards sort of thing. This is all a bit depressing. Sorry, on a Wednesday evening, we'll have something to. This is the comma, which is again a really nice.
It's common. That's why it's called comma.
A comma. I'll show you why it's a comma. It's got a punctuation mark on the underside of its wing. So, but this is a fairly sort of common butterfly. This is maybe one that's doing sort of reasonably well, kind of thing. It's one of our 5 species that can hibernate as well. They all have different strategies. Some spend the winter as an egg, some as a caterpillar, some as a chrysalis, and 5 of our species can spend the winter as an adult. And generally they're the ones you see first thing in spring. First warm day you get in spring, you'll get the comma, the brimstone, red admiral, small tortoiseshell, and the peacock. They're the 5 that can hibernate. So that's why you might see them even on even maybe January, February, if you get one really nice sunny day, they can sort of come out of hibernation, kind of thing. So there.
Can you see past me?
I'm managing, thanks.
So quite a lot of them sort of hibernate in, either go into caves or hollow trees, whatever, somewhere sheltered to spend the winter. But the commas particularly, you can see sort of there, it's all quite bright there, but when it's got its wings shut, that looks very much like a tattered autumn leaf kind of thing. So these will very much sort of, they can even sort of go down in amongst all the dead leaves at the base of a tree kind of thing, and just get in there and sheltered. So if you're out in your garden in November raking up all the leaves, you may sort of rake up a few.
What is he sitting on?
That's on a blackberry.
What?
Yeah. So quite often when all, because these sort of hibernate for the winter, quite often on the wing, sort of into October kind of thing. A lot of the flowers are gone, but it's got its proboscis there, sort of. There's obviously
Could they be grapes? Like grapes?
I'll
take your word for blackberries, but
that definitely is a blackberry, but I'm sure equally.
I thought it was ivy.
No, it does look like ivy berries, yeah. Let's see, it's sort of a blackberry breaking down, but when they start to rot a bit, they sort of open up and there's the juices in there, which are just as nice as sort of nectar to a butterfly. I suspect if it was grapes, then it might get a bit tipsy.
okay.
And,
They haven't gone over yet.
and this is clouded yellows. This is another one that some years we get a load of clouded yellows, and some years you'll barely get clouded yellow in Gwent. This year's been a reasonable year for I've seen a few kind of thing, but these again migrate up from sort of Europe quite often in springtime, a few of them, and if the weather's decent they'll lay eggs, and then you'll get a second sort of bloom of them in the autumn time. Really pretty butterfly that. And then the caterpillar there, again on nettles, showing how important nettles are. And then that's your red admiral, which is, I said, another one of the ones that sort of hibernates. And I had one flying about my garden this afternoon, so they're one you'll get right late into the year. And you mentioned sort of ivy. They particularly like ivy flowers this time of year. There's not much else in flowers, so they were. I had one of them on the ivy flowers in my garden today. That's just the underside of it there. So that most of these are sort of far more understated on the underwing, so they can look all pretty and obvious, and then if they want to, close their wings and sort of half disappear kind of thing. And this is the white admiral. This is the only butterfly in Gwent I haven't managed to get a photograph of, so that's my friend's photograph there. But there's only, Gwent's the only place in Wales where you get the white admiral butterfly, and only in a few places. They get them at the MOD site at Gwent and Slade Woods quite near there. And I've gone to Slade Woods, I think the last 5 years at the right time of year, and still failed to get a photograph. So that's my big ambition for next year. You've got to have something to live for. So there we go. That's the big. But yeah, there's not many of them at all, kind of thing. And with such a small population, and being the only population in Wales as well, they're hanging on by their fingernails, kind of thing. There used to be quite a good population in the Anghibi Valley coming up from Tintin as well, but that's gone now. But they're very much a southern loving species. Potentially, they might actually start spreading further north, depending on how the weather goes. But again, they're a woodland species that needs this kind of traditional woodland management. And the only thing their caterpillars will eat was honeysuckle as well. So there needs to be some nice honeysuckle, but sort of in a nice sunlit area as well. And then they need lots of brambles to. That's what they do most of their sort of nectar gathering from. And then so there's another one that hibernates. This is the brimstone. So this is the one they think possibly where the name butterfly came from. There's two theories where butterfly came from. One of them is just flutterby became butterfly, but the other one is it's a fly that's the colour of butter. So no one quite really knows, but they think that if it is a fly that's the colour of butter, then it came from the brimstone butterfly there. So you can see it's very, very yellow, and they never rest with their wings open. They always have them like that. And that's the female there, which is a little bit less yellow. But supposedly the only thing their caterpillars will eat is alder buckthorn and buckthorn, which are two really quite rare plants here in Gwent. But there's brimstones all over Gwent, so I think they must be eating things other than that, or there's maybe some cultivated varieties of those shrubs in our garden which they're using. But they are very sort of widespread, so they must be eating something different. So I guess there's still stuff to be discovered about them. And this is one of our blue butterflies now. So this is
Blue Adonis?
no, we don't get that here in there. There's that is one of the blues we get, the Adonis blue, which is particularly striking blue butterfly, but that's sort of down on the South Downs and the likes of Sussex and Surrey kind of thing. So this is the holly blue, which is one you're probably most likely to get in your garden. I have them in my garden in Cardiff. So that's I think that's the male one, and then the female one. And but they're so again shows how picky a butterfly can be, and if you were managing your garden, the things you need to do to make these butterflies thrive. Because the holly blue is called holly blue because the caterpillars, they have 2 generations a year. Some butterflies have 1 generation a year. These have 2 generations. So the butterflies in springtime will only lay their eggs on holly, and then those caterpillars eat the holly, form a chrysalis, and then a second generation of holly blues comes out in sort of August time, and the only thing they'll lay their eggs on is ivy. So if you had just one of those species,
What should you say is the second they lay their eggs on?
they lay their eggs on ivy in the autumn,
Ivy.
late summer, autumn, and then in the springtime they lay their eggs on holly. So
Holly.
if you only had holly in your garden, or only ivy, then the holly blue can't do its life cycle kind of thing. So it seems strange that the caterpillars would be so keen on one thing and then they won't touch it later in the year at all. And I don't know why this adaptation would come about kind of thing, but nevertheless
So that's where you get the carol, the holly and the ivy.
well, I did this talk a little while ago. I threatened to break into song, but no, I shan't break it, particularly when it's being recorded. I definitely won't be singing. But yes, so this is she's actually laying an egg there on the ivy, and you can see, hopefully you can see there, she's laid just one little egg there, and so then this is the small blue, which is
Very small.
yeah, very small, yes. The normal blues aren't much bigger, but this is very small, and there's not many places where we get them in Gwent, and most of them isn't blue, but they always have this just sort of sprinkling of blue dust on them. It's really, really pretty little butterfly. And then this is probably our most familiar blue. This is the common blue, but this is the underside. So they have all these amazing sort of patterns underneath, and then that's the common blue. And there is a very similar one, as Mike mentioned, the Adonis blue, but the Adonis blue is just incredible sort of blue. But also on the common blue, these little bits of black sort of extend a little bit out into the white, and they don't do that on the Adonis blue. But you actually don't get them here in Gwent. But really, really pretty butterflies. But the only thing their caterpillars will eat was bird's foot trefoil, some eggs and bacon. So quite a common plant. They generally do. It's quite a common, widespread butterfly. So the male is all blue, but then the female is generally a lot browner. But she'll always have a little bit of blue to various degrees in on it. And then we have the brown argus, which is one of the blue butterflies, but it has absolutely no blue on it at all, just to confuse things. This is a lot more sort of localized species, and it can be very difficult to tell apart from the female common blue. But generally, she'd have just a little tiny bit of blue in there. Or you can get very technical and look at the underside of the wing, and so that's the underside of a common blue, and that's the underside of a brown argus. And I won't bore you here, but this one has 2 spots close together, and then She has one spot there, and that spot is missing on the brown Argus there.
These are very fine genetic differences, aren't they?
They are, yeah. It's
very fine.
very, very sort of fine, but yet they're caterpillars will eat entirely different things. So they're obviously very closely related, but yet they all sort of have their little niches kind of thing, which, you know, I guess if everything all wanted to eat the same plant, there'd be just a massive caterpillars all fighting each other. So it all sort of it all works out well. But obviously some butterflies, they choose to go for quite scarce plants, which by necessity then makes them scarce kind of thing. Or if the holly blue, it needs these two different ones, which again sort of makes life harder for them. I don't know. And then sort of in with all the sort of blues, this is the small copper. This is, and this is one butterfly which I think has had a really good year this year for whatever reason. I've seen more small coppers this sort of late summer and autumn than I've ever seen before. So their caterpillars eat sorrel, which is quite a common plant, but for whatever reason they've had a really good year. So there we go. That's our positive bit of news for the evening. Really pretty little butterfly again. That's really small little one. And then we have all our browns. So this is probably our commonest butterfly. This the meadow brown. So the meadow brown has a single white dot in its black eye. And this is the female meadow brown, and this is the male meadow brown. Again, a single white dot. And then we have the gatekeeper, which has two white dots in the black thing, and generally has a lot more sort of orange on it kind of thing. But all these brown butterflies, their caterpillars eat grass. So they tend to do quite well in a meadow. If you're not too fussy and you'll eat grass, there's grass everywhere kind of thing. But there are still issues. They still need lots of nice wildflowers in their meadows for the adults to get their nectar from. And obviously if people are spraying chemicals or they're cutting the grass too soon, then it'll all get cut before the caterpillars can get through their life cycle. But they're generally doing quite well, sort of some of the brown butterflies. So generally you'll get the first meadow browns out in late May, June, and then the gatekeepers don't arrive until probably early July. So even though they're quite similar, generally if you're seeing one in sort of June time, it's going to be in the meadow brown. Then when you get into July, it could be either. And the other name for these is the hedge brown, because these tend to stick to the edges of fields along the hedgerows, whereas the meadow browns are more out across the. So again, they're just filling these little sort of niches, sort of almost in the same habitat. And then you've got ringlet there, another one of our brown butterflies. Now this next photograph is X-rated, I think. Well, there we go. Yes, they've had the decency to sort of cover things with their wings there. So, but you can see why it's called a ringlet. It's got a so on the top you can almost get a hint of the rings, but underneath is really sort of great sort of wings. And I think a lot of the butterflies that have these kind of eyes on them is a bit of a defense mechanism. Sort of it might startle a predator. If you suddenly see, if I'm walking home tonight and something with 5 eyes suddenly appears, I'm gonna run the other way kind of thing. But also generally the eyes are kind of situated more up here, away from the head and the body of the butterfly. So quite often predators will peck at an eye kind of thing, and if a predator pecks at the eye of this, it'll get pecked in the wing. It might have a bit of a tatty wing, but it'll still be alive. So it sort of works, sort of shocking predators, but also sort of diverting their attention to attack a less vital part of their body. And then we've got another brown. This is the wall brown, which is one that's really sort of struggling, but it really likes basking on walls, on rocks. But that's just in a few areas in the hills, and in the UK it's largely confined to the coast now kind of thing. It's sort of a species that's really struggling. And that's the underside of the wall brown, which is again really pretty. But you can see all the eyes sort of more situated out around the edge there. And then this is the small heath, which is just has the one duck, like the meadow ground, but it's an altogether far smaller little butterfly. And then the grayling, which is a Gwent Wildlife Trust. We're focusing on 10 vulnerable species to sort of reverse their fortunes up to 2030. And after 2030, we'll stop caring. Obviously, we won't stop caring at 2030, but that's kind of our goal for sort of doing stuff for these species. But they're all, the idea of all these species is they sort of represent different habitats within Gwent. So the grayling particularly likes sort of bare ground. It needs flowers, obviously, but we like bare ground for basking on. So old quarries, sort of areas of colliery spoil, which is obviously huge areas in South Wales. This is where they're really that's where they thrive. And but a lot of these areas are kind of under threat. So our work to sort of help preserve the grayling will actually help, hundreds of other species that share their habitats.
Just before you move on from grayling, Andy,
yeah.
the grayling is obviously
a fish
as well.
Yes, yeah.
And I can see certain if that's a sort of big wing, it's like resembles.
I don't know if there's any relationship between the naming, the etymology of the boat.
Fin on the top of its back, grayling. There could be some connection.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But carry on.
I'll have to dig into that. But you can see the camouflage on these is really good as well. Sort of when it's wings shut, they always have their wings shut, and they also always they know where the sun is, and they try to sort of bask at the same time. They try and angle themselves. So they cast quite a small shadow as well. So they really sort of so if you watch one over a whole day and it didn't move apart from, it would just sort of move its body around with the sun kind of thing. But obviously it'd probably get bored and fly off. But again, they're another one with generally they keep that eye hidden, but they can just suddenly flick that wing up kind of thing and make themselves a little bit more obvious. And I said they always rest with their wings up, but I think there's some poor female grayling in the middle of all that somewhere. They all got a bit excited there, so it was a rare chance to actually see their upper wings. There you can see they're all on the heather there, which is sort of grows on the sort of colliery spoil tips and the like.
It's perhaps grayling spawning, some similarity.
Yes. So this is the 10 species I mentioned. So we've got water vole, pine marten, hedgehog, dipper, nightjar, barn owl, shrill carder grayling, pink ballerina waxcap, and the adder there. So this is the 10 species we're sort of focusing on, and sort of the hedgehogs representing the more sort of urban garden environment, the adders there sort of representing the heaths, the grayling is sort of colliery spoil, the shrill carder the species-rich grasslands, the dippers there to provide some kind of focus to our work on the rivers. So it's all sort of representing different habitats. So we're trying to do different work to help them all, and also help countless other species along there.
If you had 11 and 12, would salmon and sea trout be on there because they're under threat as well?
Well, we did. We had a list of lots of species, and we whittled it down. Then all of a sudden we had 9, and then we needed to get some more. Then I think we were back up to 12 or 13.
Okay.
But we certainly had a fish in there. But then we decided we'll have the dipper to sort of represent the water courses, and hopefully obviously they need a water course with lots of caddisfly, good water quality. So the dipper's doing well with salmon and trout.
Angilly River, I've seen the Angilly River. I've seen dippers.
Yeah, they tend to prefer maybe more the side channels than the actual main sort of water course kind of thing. Anyway,
Do we have many pine marten, and therefore do we have any red squirrels?
we have no red squirrels. Sadly, they sort of went a long time ago. But there is red squirrels in Wales. There's red squirrels up in Anglesey, because they've managed to keep the grey squirrels largely out of there, because there's only 2 ways they can get in. I think the Britannia Bridge and whatever the other one's called.
And that was closed, isn't it? So
Yes, saw that in the news. Yeah, that's specifically to keep grey squirrels out. And then there's a little bit of a population in North Wales, and there's a small population of red squirrels in Mid Wales. every year I get some emails telling me that people have seen red squirrels in Gwent, and it never is. It's kind of a grey squirrel. It's got a little bit more brown in its fur at a certain time of year. So we don't have them, but the pine marten, they were, again, there was a small population in mid Wales, but Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust did a reintroduction, I'd say probably started about 6 years ago and finished about 3 years ago, which was great, because they did all the hard work, introduced them to Gloucestershire, got all the funding for that, got various people for doing it, and we just had to sit here and just let them come across the River Wye to us without any effort. So it's all good. So yes, we do have them here in Gwent now. Probably the first one. Yes, yeah. So we've had
So is there not a relationship between having pine martens and more red squirrels?
Ultimately, there should be, yeah, because
It's not happened yet.
no, we need either the pine martens to do more controlling of the red squirrel, and not the grey squirrel, and you can maybe think about a reintroduction, or hopefully the red squirrels will gradually spread, because there's now a pine marten population in mid Wales, and there's a pine marten population in Gloucestershire, which is now very much into Gwent, and it's hoping they're going to spread, and I think they've calculated the two populations are going to mix somewhere north of Cardiff in so many years' time, kind of thing. So ultimately we should have a pine marten population across Wales, and then hopefully that will then allow the red squirrel population to spread out from its sort of remnant core kind of thing, because the grey squirrel is altogether a bit bulkier and it can't get to the end branches. So if a pine marten's chasing a squirrel up a tree, the red squirrel can get right to the end branches and the pine marten can't get there, but the grey squirrel can't and the pine marten will get it. That's the theory behind it.
I thought it was also the smell that grey squirrels can't smell pine marten, what have you, where they're scent marked, and therefore they don't do defensive behaviours.
Right, I haven't heard that.
Whereas red squirrels get really alarmed when they can smell. It's like lions, isn't it?
Right.
Lionry, that lots of wild creatures get very sensitive to that smell and get very cautious. So red squirrels don't do anything, are very defensive when they can smell them.
Right.
Whereas grey squirrels think, oh,
just sit there and then get
and get eaten.
Right.
That's what I've heard.
And so
There's
the
some
pine
truth
marten
in
and the red squirrel are both native to the UK as well, so they will have lived together and adapted together for thousands of years, with grey squirrels from North America, so maybe it isn't quite so savvy to what a pine marten can do. But that will all be quite a long way in the future. But hopefully this will have some good. It will help the red squirrel, but it will all take some time. But we've been putting up trail cameras sort of across Gwent over the last couple of years, and I think it's maybe 6 of them now. We're focusing on like 1 kilometre squares, and I think 6 of them now we've had pine martens on the trail cameras, so we know they're certainly spreading out. We have put some den boxes up as well for them, because they generally nest in a big old hollow tree, and there's not so many big hollow trees anymore. You know, they get blown down, or there's health and safety, they get cut down, so we put up some den boxes.
How big are pine martens?
There we go, I'm not gonna. There we go, Stella can demonstrate.
Well, I thought without the tail.
Yeah, it's probably like that, and then the tail's probably the same again kind of thing.
I've seen them coming down on the road, driving from central Wales back to this area.
Right, you saw a pine marten?
Remote bit of a road, and what's this coming down? It's pine marten.
Oh,
Well,
nice.
I don't know, I haven't recorded it now.
But yeah,
It's
there
quite
is
exciting.
indeed, yeah. So there is certainly I think there's always a population sort of in mid Wales just hanging on, and that's been bolstered by some reintroduction. So hopefully, you know, we will. But when we've been putting out the cameras, we put out the camera for 30 days and an egg, but we also put out a tin of anchovies, so that brings them in kind of thing. So
They,
but-
they also like gooseberry jam.
gooseberry jam is it? Oh, there we go.
Okay, some of their friends, yes.
So as I said, kind of like a bit of an apex predator really, because we don't have wolves and lions and all this. There'll never be, you know, really high populations of them, you know, but they'll be, hopefully they will be spread throughout Gwent and then further west kind of thing. And certainly there's been some other reintroductions and they've certainly been spread, and I think some were seen sort of almost into Bristol recently kind of thing. So it was quite interesting what they did. So they're all radio tagged. This is supposed to be a butterfly. I totally forgot we were talking about butterflies.
We've had more divergence in the assembly, don't worry about it.
It was interesting, some of them when they released them, they all had radio collars on, and some of them sort of got released and they didn't move anywhere, and some of them just, over the course of a few days, they were like 200 kilometres away up in Shropshire kind of thing. So it was interesting, you know, how they sort of did it. But actually some have made it across the various bridges on the Wye, and they're with us now, which is great. Back to butterflies. This is just a bit more about the grayling kind of thing, because it's, you know, one of our 10 species sort of. But we'll skip over that, and then this is the last of our brown species. This is the marbled white, but the marbled white isn't a white; it's a brown, because the name focuses on the white part of it. But if you imagine it's a brown butterfly with quite a lot of white on it. So this is sort of, again, sort of very similar habitats to kind of all our other brown ones. They're sort of very much butterflies of our meadows, species-rich meadows, caterpillars eating various grasses, but they're just a bit more exciting than the sort of meadow browns and the like, and very sort of graceful when you see them flying.
We have more this year than we've had for some years.
Oh right, excellent. Oh great. Yeah, they are really nice. They're nice to see, and really sort of pretty underneath as well, and they're quite a southern species as well. So we get quite a lot here in Gwent, but if you move further north, further west, you don't tend to see the marbled whites so much at all. But they're a real sort of highlight of our meadows in sort of June, July time. And then this is speckled wood, which I mentioned. This is one of the ones which is actually doing quite well. It wasn't quite a southern species, but it does really sort of. This is one of the few ones you'll see flying when it's a bit overcast, maybe even a bit drizzly. So if we don't have not so good summers, this one seems to still manage to do quite well, and it's quite often in people's gardens as well as the wider countryside. So it's doing well. But you know, up until 50 years ago, it wasn't. So it's funny how these things sort of change. It gives some hope that some of the ones that are struggling now, you know, fortunes may change again, kind of thing. And then we've got the skippers. So these are quite small little butterflies. They really do fly sort of quick. It looks more like a moth. This. So this is the dingy skipper, which there's a bit sort of dingy. There we go. But quite a rare sort of moth here. And if you see a dingy skipper, you know you're in a really good place. You know, you see meadow grounds everywhere, but these are more sort of specialised. So it'll only be in sort of some of the more specialised areas. Like trying to think where's a good site to see them. Quite a few of the local nature reserves in Torvine, which are all on old colliery spoil areas. They have good populations of the dingy skip, which is always sort of nice to see. There's huge scars in the countryside from industrial kind of stuff, but over 30, 40, 50 years now they're supporting some of our sort of rarest butterflies. And then we have the grizzled skipper here, which is even scarcer in Gwent. There's not many sites for them, but again down in the MOD, Went, and on our Dixton Embankment Reserve near Monmouth as well is a good site to see these. Really tiny little butterfly, but really pretty little thing. And then we have more skippers. This is the large skipper, a male one. It has this black sex brand, they call it, on the wing, but it's slightly more mottled wings on the large skipper. And this is the small skipper, which is a little bit smaller, but you can sort of see it's a bit more, the brown, the orange is a bit more mottled on the large skipper than the small skipper there. But again, really pretty little flash of gold kind of thing. And you can see on the underside of the antenna here is kind of goldy brown, but there's another skipper called the Essex skipper, and they look almost identical, apart from it's black on the underneath of the thing where there's the orange there kind of thing. As Essex skipper would imply, we didn't get these in Gwent until 20 years ago. They were, well, probably first described in Essex, but they've spread north and west, and we get them now in Gwent. So this is, you know, one of the things of climate change. You know, we're getting new butterfly species moving in. This one was down in our Bridewell Reserve down near Mayger. This quite unusual caterpillar here is of a white letter hair streak. So when we had to prove I did other work than the stuff that Mike said, we did quite a lot of work collecting tree seeds for the UK National Tree Seed Project for Kew. So we had to collect seeds from every geographic region of the UK, from every species of tree and shrub, and from upland and lowland sites. So we did all of Gwent and some neighbouring areas as well. Collected millions of seeds and sent them off. But I was collecting, the only thing this will eat is wych elm. So I was collecting wych elm seeds in the Llantoni Valley, and I had to had a big pole cutting off the branches that had the seeds on. And I cut one branch down, and there was this caterpillar on there, which is this very unusually shaped little caterpillar with a white letter hair streak. So I couldn't reach to put it back in the tree, so it came home with me and got well looked after. We had to go and collect wych elm leaves for it every few days. But this is what came out, which is well worth it. Beautiful white letter hair streak. So it's got the letter W on its wing there. And so then we had to have another trip all the way back up to the Llantoni Valley with one butterfly in the car to release it back where it came from. So I wouldn't want to, obviously had to go back to where there was wych elm, otherwise it didn't have a chance, but also there'll be areas of wych elm with no white letter hair streak population. It'd been really sad to have released it where there was no other butterflies. So when we took it back, we had a nice day out and released our one butterfly, shed a tear, and off it went. And I was mentioning like the eyes on the wings earlier. These have these kind of little tassels here, which again is thought supposed to almost look like maybe antennae. So a bird would potentially peck it here rather than here, and then obviously it can fly off and just got a little bit of a tatty wing. But all these hair streaks are quite sort of scarce butterflies. You don't see them very often. So I was lucky to be able to breed this one from a caterpillar.
It only gives it 50-50 though, doesn't it?
What's that?
If it encounters a bird, it's only got a 50-50 chance.
It has got a 50-50 chance, yeah. I guess it's better than none, yes. And then we've got the green hair streak here.
That's beautiful.
It is really, really beautiful. And I think this photograph, it's quite a nice photograph, but even this doesn't even do it justice. If the sun catches these just right, it's like, you know, a little thing of it. It's only a tiny butterfly as well, but it's a little thing of emerald kind of thing. But it's a lot duller on the upper wing, but on the underwing it's just this amazing green. But again, these aren't at many sites in Gwent. I've seen these on the Blorange, and this one was on Bryn Arw, which is north of Abergavenny, where they have their stump up for trees. And when you drive out of Abergavenny towards Hereford on the A465 and you look left, you can see there's all the letters written on the hillside. You may have seen that. But that's their stump up for trees. So they planted 130,000 trees on the hillside there a few years ago. And then we did the monitoring of the bird population and the butterfly population sort of pre-tree planting, and then it'll be monitored as the trees come up, and if the whole hillside was covered in trees, you'd lose your green hair streak kind of thing. But thankfully they've only planted part of the hillside, so hopefully it'll be this nice mosaic kind of thing. But this one was up on Bryn Arw there. And then this is the purple hair streak, which I've only seen twice, and this was an incredibly battered individual, but you can see what remains of its purple glory is there, but you can see its wings are all a bit tatty, but these generally spend virtually all their lives up in the canopy. They'll do a lot of their feeding on aphid honeydew. All their caterpillars will eat is oak leaves. They don't really need to come down low, so you rarely ever see them. They'll occasionally come down and feed on maybe some brambles or whatever. But I think this was quite late in the year, and I think it was on its last legs, and it kind of fluttered down and it landed on my leg, and I was trying to somehow, as I'd never seen one before, photograph it on my leg without it flying away. So it required some manoeuvring, and I think eventually ended up on a plastic tub there, which isn't very aesthetic for the photograph, but there we go. So they're a reasonably common butterfly, but you just don't see them. But if you look up the top of a big mature oak tree in August time, and there's lots of little butterflies flying about, it probably will be a purple hair streak. And then this is going on quite a bit. I do apologise. I think it was more than 30 odd species I should have counted, but I think this is the last. This is all our fritillaries now. So I think fritillary comes from the Latin or the Greek, which refers to like checkerboard kind of thing. So that's why you have the fritillary flower as well, which has like a checkerboard pattern, and that's why the butterfly has the same name. So this is the small pearl-bordered fritillary. Virtually all our fritillary species, the only things their caterpillars will eat is violet. So again, they're quite fussy. So this is a small pearl-bordered fritillary. We used to have the pearl-bordered fritillary as well. But that's another one which very much relied on sort of more traditional woodlands sort of management, coppicing and the like, to create these little glades and rides in the woodland. So sadly, the pearl-bordered fritillary is now extinct. The nearest population is at Usk sort of in Herefordshire, but we still have the small pearl-bordered fritillary, which is more of a butterfly of our sort of hillsides, bracken-covered hillsides that have got violets underneath. So, but they're very difficult to tell apart. But in the small pearl-bordered fritillary, this dot is closer to the edge than it is to this thing. Again, it's all a bit, and that's the pearl-bordered one there. But you can see underneath, this is why they're called pearl-bordered. They're kind of lovely underneath, and it's kind of these pearl things there. So really, really beautiful butterfly. And they're a species that's doing really poorly, but we are blessed with some really good populations in South Wales of the small pearl-bordered fritillary. And then there's the dark green fritillary, which looks very similar to the high brown fritillary, which is another species which is extinct in Gwent, sadly. I think there's only one population left in Wales now, over near Ogmore, but there's a lot of conservation work going on there to make sure that isn't lost. But we still have quite a lot of the dark green fritillary, and this is the high brown fritillary, which is sadly now extinct, but it has these little rusty things around the spots there that differentiate it. And this is the silver washed fritillary. So they're all basically on a similar kind of design, all these fritillaries. And this is very much a woodlands butterfly, and there's good populations of these in the Wye Valley. Probably our biggest butterfly as well. They're quite like this kind of thing. But sort of butterfly, sort of high summer kind of thing, and you probably see them sort of swooping about the Wye Valley, and if you find like a nice clump of bramble, they can't resist a clump of bramble, and it'll come down and sort of nectar. And then our last one, this is probably the most special butterfly to Wales. This is the marsh fritillary. So unlike all the other fritillaries, the only thing this caterpillar will eat is devil's bit scabious, so incredibly fussy. And we've lost a lot of our devil's bit scabious. That's a plant of sort of marshy grassland, and we've drained lots of our marshy grasslands to make them more profitable for agriculture. And with doing that, we've lost the devil's bit scabious, and we've lost the marsh fritillary. So there were there were populations over near the Angidi Valley, but now the only sort of population in sort of Gwent or Gwent or Greater Gwent is at Aberbargoed Grasslands, which is in Caerphilly, sort of, well, not Aberbargoed, but they are sort of very distinctive larval webs. So they sort of come out in May and June time, and then they lay loads of eggs near the Devil's bit scabious, and then the caterpillars produce this kind of silken web that they all live in for protection, and then they're feeding on the Devil's bit scabious, and then they spend the winter as caterpillars, which I'm not quite sure how they manage to do, because they, as the name implies, they live in kind of marshes, and some of these marshes are almost underwater in the winter, but somehow all these little vulnerable caterpillars survive kind of out in the open, in the cold, in the wet, just in this little larval web, and then in springtime they come out again, bask, eat a little bit more, and then sort of pupate. And I think that might be it.
It's quite busy.
In there, yes, yeah. So that was that was spring this year. That was, and there weren't many leaves left for them, kind of thing. But they still had quite a bit of growing to do. So hopefully they found enough leaves. But I guess with all these butterflies, they lay a lot of eggs, and all it needs is 2 or 3 of them to make it to adulthood, and then that carries on the population there. But yes, there's a bit of competition going on there. I think that's it. I'm sure all of you are members of Gwent Wildlife Trust.
Yeah, I am.
There we go. But if
students is as well.
If people aren't, and you'd like to become a member of Gwent Wildlife Trust, then please do, because it helps us care for all our reserves. You've got 30 reserves that you can go to if you're a member or not, to be honest, but they're all there, and we look after them and campaign against damage and developments, do lots of survey work, educating children, adults alike. So your membership allows us to have the money to act in the best possible way for the wildlife here in Gwent. So if anybody would like to join, then please do. But I'm not putting any more pressure on, and that is it. But any questions at all? Sorry, that was an awful lot of butterflies.
Well, no, I'd just like to give thanks on that now, Andy. And the questions, they normally go at the end, but just the nature of your talk, it worked better that the
people
questions.
diving in, yes,
Yeah,
I'm
because
quite happy for that.
It wouldn't work
No.
afterwards. But nonetheless, I know I learnt an awful lot. Any questions I had prior to this talk
Right,
were
then
answered
covered.
in the talk.
There we go.
But the biggest things I picked out was the overall trend for butterflies is down. Is
Yes,
that correct?
very much so. Yeah, there's been the National Butterfly Monitoring Scheme has ran since 1976.
Yeah.
So that's I shouldn't know. I was born in 1976. I'm trying to work out how many years that was, but I shouldn't know.
I'm 20 years old.
It's so it'll be next year. Will be its 50th year kind of thing, and so they've got all this. Basically, lots of volunteers go out and they walk a transect every week between April and October, and they record the butterflies every week, and it's gone on for years and years. So it's really great, and the UK is fantastic at doing this kind of stuff, having these long-term sort of citizen science information on lots of our sort of wildlife populations. So they've got 50 years of information, and some of the sites will have been walked for 50 years, and there really is this downward trend kind of thing. But there's less habitat. There's increasingly, I know you can probably look back, and there's always been funny summers, but there seems to be more extreme weathers, and I think even some of our milder winters don't help. So I kind of think that in 2024 the insect populations were dreadful, and I think quite a lot of them, a lot of their sort of moths and whatever, they sort of pupate underground, and you wouldn't think they'd want it too cold, but if it's wet and quite warm, then fungus and all this will actually form on their chrysalises underground, and they're just going to rot in the ground kind of thing. So we need sort of, I think, more traditional colder winters and
for spawning salmon maybe
Yeah.
as well.
yeah, so there's all sorts of problems that they're sort of competing against kind of thing. So obviously if we can help them in any way we can, to be honest.
Yeah. The other thing I've learnt tonight is I was obviously aware of cabbage whites, but I wasn't aware how butterflies were so dependent on things like nettles and other types of things growing. Those are the two things I've learned tonight. But let's just, does anybody have any more questions they'd like to ask Andy?
How do the caterpillars move from one site where they're feeding to a site which is suitable for them pupating?
They generally sort of, when they think, oh, I'm full, I think they kind of, they won't go a huge distance, but they will, you've probably maybe seen them crossing paths and the like kind of thing. They will just
Go, because
Yeah.
where my daughter is in Dorset, there are a lot of red admirals and various things like that.
Yeah.
They're feeding on the hedges,
Mm.
and then they go up into the oak trees to pupate.
Yeah, generally they quite often like
And
a
that's
lot of
really quite extraordinary, Johnny.
yeah, so a lot of moths like the sort of pupate underground, but generally butterflies they tend to like to get a bit of height kind of thing, and
Right.
you're on the side of the trees. And obviously the side of a tree, if you've got a pupa and you've got the bark, it's generally quite well camouflaged kind of thing. And you're out of the way of more predators, I dare
I think
say.
it probably is it.
And if the ground flooded, you're up above that. So generally they'll sort of they'll maybe crawl. I think they can maybe crawl, probably 20 or 30 meters kind of thing to find somewhere suitable kind of thing.
Do you have
Any more?
any?
Yeah.
So do you have any reserves? You've got 30 reserves, I
Yeah.
understand. Do you have any dedicated or focused on providing habitat for specific species of butterfly? Because
Generally,
some of them seem quite specialised, don't they?
yeah. So most of our reserves we tend to manage for generally to be good for lots of wildlife kind of thing. I think if we had any, if we had marsh fritillaries, I think we probably would, because they're probably they're the only one of those species which is like statutorily protected. We probably would be making particular allowances to make sure that there was lots of devil's bit scabious, and then they also need quite tussocky grass as well to sort of survive the winter in. So we'd be managing, I know reserves further west, the real stronghold for marsh fritillaries is Carmarthenshire, Pembrokeshire. They have very specific sort of grazing regimes to make sure there's tussocky grass, but not too much, because then that shades out all the devil's bit scabious, but too much grazing, there isn't the tussocky grass for the caterpillars to survive the winter. So I don't think any of our reserves have that rare a butterfly on that we would specifically manage for that. We're more managing to get lots of, say in our meadows, just a wide range of flowers, and particularly sort of, we want to have flowers right throughout the season, because you could have a certain site where you've got massive flowers in June, but ideally you want sort of flowers in March, April, when butterflies are first appearing, right through until sort of September, October kind of thing.
So marsh fritillaries aren't attracted to the Gwent levels, or?
No, there's hardly any devil's bit scabious down there for whatever reason. It just doesn't seem to grow there kind of thing. And it's generally
wet enough underfoot, isn't it?
Yeah, and certainly generally they sort of go to this top grass, purple moorgrass, which is a really tussocky thing, which doesn't seem to grow much on the Gwent levels either. So potentially you could maybe get a population down there if you plug planted devil's bit scabious and did this. But again, the marsh fritillary is a bit of a pain as well, because it kind of, there's a wasp that parasitizes it.
Okay.
So it kind of needs to live in like a meta population. So there needs to be maybe 15 populations of marsh fritillaries, and they're not very strong flying either, so they'll maybe only fly up to 1 kilometre. So if you had a population and the wasp got in there, that can wipe them out. And if you haven't got another marsh fritillary population within 1 kilometre, it'll never repopulate kind of thing. So you kind of need them all dotted about. And But interestingly, I might shut up in a minute, but I'm not going to now. There's like the marsh fritillary has this wasp that parasitises them and lays its eggs in, and then the wasps burst out, and it's all a bit horrific. But then the wasp that parasitises the marsh fritillary, there's another species of wasp that only parasitises the wasp that only parasitises the marsh fritillary. It's amazing what goes on. But they did a reintroduction onto Llantrisant Common, fairly near Cardiff, where they used to be, and they got some marsh fritillary from I think up near Hawaii, and brought them down there, and they had them all in cages and breeding them on, and then they noticed some had been parasitised by wasps, and I think my reaction might have been to, well, this could totally throw our whole translocation, we need to kill these wasps. But by definition, these wasps are even scarcer than the marsh fritillary, and then the wasps that parasitise the wasp is even rarer. So they carefully gathered up all the little tiny, they're only tiny little wasps, gathered them up, and they took them all back to Hawaii kind of thing. And then obviously some of them hadn't been parasitised in the population, and it's doing quite well at Llantrisant now. But so it shows not to be sort of, I don't know if the word sort of elitist, but thinking that the butterfly, we just protect that because it's the butterfly and it's pretty. But in reality, these wasps are even rarer. So there we go. I'm going to shut up now.
Yeah, I think I won't mention hornets, so you'll follow them again. But I found that fascinating, I have to say, Andy. I hope everybody else did as well. I thought that was really good.